All right, get this. 15,000 miles, 5 planes, 4 lessons learned, 3 years, 2 watches, and 1 massive mistake, all for my very first vintage watch. So why did I have to go through so much trouble for this thing? Sit back, relax, hit that subscribe button because we're in for a ride.
I learned pretty early on that in the watch world, the hunt never ends. About 3 years ago in 2022, I got the itch to dabble into the world of vintage watches. I was tired of seeing the same Daytonas, GMTs, Nautiluses, and Royal Oaks plastered all over everyone's Instagram, so me, trying to be a little bit different, started looking into the past. But Cartier had always been on my radar. When you hear Cartier watches, the first 2 watches that come to mind are typically the Tank and the Crash. However, spending 5 figures on a modern tank kitted with the quartz movement just didn't scream good value to me, and the Crash cost more than the average home in America, so that was immediately out of the picture. So I started looking into older Cartiers. Cartier isn't like Rolex with its innovation or Patek in their finishing, but they do stand out with their design, in particular with their shapes. Most vintage Cartiers were pretty small, but there were a handful released in the 70s that had proportions of a modern day 36mm watch. We'll get to these a bit later, but they were contenders for my collection. I wanted something that looked cool, was pretty unique, and wouldn't be a dumb financial decision at the end of the day. Pretty quickly, I narrowed my search down to an obscure 1970s Cartier called the Cristallor. So I stood on the sideline for majority of the next 2 years, but was watching the prices on these absolutely skyrocket. What was once a sub $10,000 watch was quickly appreciating to $15,000, then $20,000, and even touching $25,000 late 2024 for ones in great condition. Worried that I would quickly be priced out of the market if I didn't make a move, I started looking at every piece that popped up, notification set on every website, waiting for the right one at the right price. Then, late November 2024, I saw one listed at $19,000 by a vintage watch dealer out of Singapore. Thousands under where the rest were. Sure, there were a few spots on the dial, but the dealer said that they looked near invisible when the watch was on wrist, and blinded by the price tag, I quickly looked past it. After a few messages back and forth, and being the shrewd negotiator that I am, I pulled the trigger and sent a wire for $14,000 halfway around the world and waited. The FedEx tracking number finally updated and said ready for pickup. It was raining on our way to FedEx, but that wouldn't dampen my mood to get my hands on something I've been chasing for so long.
They don't really pack these nicely, as y'all can see. Not the retail experience. Here's a watch. Wow, it's so gold. Came with the original strap and an updated strap. Here it is. It's so small. Wow.
The watch was everything I wanted, and you couldn't get it off my wrist if you tried the first few weeks. I loved the Art Deco aesthetic, the way it sounded when it was wound, and the proportions of it on my wrist. It was perfect. However, as the new watch high was slowly wearing off, the flaws became more and more apparent. Although the dealer was right and the spots weren't too visible when the watch was on wrist, the more I wore it, the more I started focusing on them rather than the actual watch. My eyes would just gravitate towards the spotting and discoloration on the dial instead of the iconic Cartier Roman numerals, the over-polished caseback instead of the cool design, the scratched up crystal instead of the bright blue sword hands, and it went on and on.
All right, we have a little bit of a plot twist. The Cristallor is no longer mine. It's been a little over a month since this thing came in, and last night it sold. I'm sure you guys are thinking, why did you sell a watch that you just got in that you've been wanting for so long? You know, it was honestly one of those offers that you just couldn't say no to. Because of the condition of this watch, I was able to pick it up at a stupid good price, and then when I got offered what I got offered, it was hard to say no, just because I know that I could find something that's in much better condition for just a little bit more than what this sold for, and the hunt begins for another one. You know, half the fun is in the hunt for a watch, especially for vintage, where you're like learning a ton about the watch. Taking everything that I've learned, I feel like I have a good understanding of this particular model and exactly what I want for the next watch. It was fun. It was fun while it lasted, but let the journey continue.
Is it bad to say that I was weirdly relieved? For whatever reason, I just assumed that this would be super hard to sell or I'd be taking a massive hit on it. But luckily, it all worked out, and it was freeing being able to start over and do it right this time around. So I told myself I wouldn't even consider a vintage watch unless I knew every little detail there was to know about it. It was ridiculous looking back and handing over that much money without being an expert in the watch. Back to the drawing boards I went, not realizing that even researching a vintage Cartier would be a challenge. If you know anything about vintage watches, then you've definitely heard the name Eric Wind. As an early Hodinkee writer, a former VP for the watch division of the world's largest auction house Christie's, and now the owner of Wind Vintage, he's regularly in the conversation for one of the most knowledgeable vintage watch experts in the world. I figured I'd send him a cold DM to see if he'd be willing to talk shop on vintage Cartier. He was graciously down, so I took the flight over to Miami and drove an hour and a half north to Palm Beach to learn from the man himself.
I kind of want to bring you here because of the lack of resources, because of the lack of information on vintage Cartier. It's really, I feel like a lot of the history just goes orally right now. You know, with vintage Rolex, you can just Google the text on the dial or the serial number and like something will pop up in the forums or in one of these blogs and stuff. But with Cartier, it's kind of hard. Like the dials only say Cartier Paris.
Exactly. The other kind of issue with Cartier is you really had watches made for three distinct markets. You had them Paris, you had them for London, and you had them for the US market.
Yeah.
So you have a wide array of brands that made watches for Cartier. You had a wide array of case makers. Some were made in London, some made in France, some made in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Really is, it's one of the most complex things to collect.
So in the 1970s, these three houses came together under one roof and all watch production was moved over to Switzerland. To mark the start of this, in 1973, 12 different models were released under the Louis Cartier Collection, commercializing watches for Cartier. All 12 had that classic Cartier design language, and the differences were in the case shapes and size. Since this was the first time Cartier watches were sequentially serialized, collectors are able to tell rough production numbers for each model by tracking the ones that come through for sale. The rarest of these is the Coussin, also known as the Bamboo, with only 250 units made, and speculation is that the Cristallor is the second rarest with about 900 produced. The Coussin recently sold for $150,000, and the Cristallor is arguably undervalued, hovering at around $20,000 to $30,000 depending on condition at the time of posting this video.
The Grail you brought here.
Yes, yeah, this is a Bamboo.
Bamboo. These things have been incredible.
This is the slightly smaller size, the kind of ladies version, if you will. But it's still, I mean, again, these watches 10 to 15 years ago were under $10,000, and now we're asking over $80,000 for that, and the larger size recently sold at auction for about $150,000, I believe.
Yeah.
Not a price I ever would have anticipated. Otherwise, I would have stocked everyone up that I could find. They're really fun and funky. Really, Cartier is about the case design more than anything else. The dials are not expensive to produce, and they're not particularly special. They're just like a white lacquer paint typically. It's all about the case shape and case design. The movements are nothing spectacular either.
ETA movements, I believe, in this area, correct?
Yeah, this is a Bouche Giraud. They use JLC movements as well that are typically signed European Watch and Clock Company.
With design being where Cartier shines, there's no question why models like the Cristallor have picked up steam recently. Named after the French word for crystal, the triple-stepped octagonal design is a star of the show. The case allowed this watch to wear larger than the rest of the models in the Louis Cartier collection. The size was less desirable back in the 70s, but is now preferred with the gradual increase in sizes for men's watches.
The Cristallor has definitely gotten popular the last few years. The prices have climbed significantly as a result. They're not common. I mean, I never thought there would be people that cared enough about the Cristallor to be
That's
like,
true.
Okay, there's a Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, let's compare the case numbers of all examples known online. We're talking about watches that are 25 numbers apart and they have significant differences. It's crazy to think about.
There's a gentleman on Instagram who's put together a deep dive into the Cristallor, tracking each variation. There are 3 different dial variations and 2 different case variations. The Mark 1 features a Vendome style center lug, which Eric actually has for sale, while the Mark 2 features more traditional lugs, which mine is. The Mark III features a change in the dial, introducing a flat A in the Cartier logo and a hidden signature reminiscing modern pieces inside the Roman numeral 7. Additionally, under 6 o'clock you'll see the word Swiss, Paris, or Swiss made. If it says Swiss, the watch was likely sold through the New York boutique. If it says Paris, it was likely sold through the London or Paris boutique. And if it says Swiss made, then the dial was replaced at a later time when the watch was sent in for servicing.
From the collector perspective, the Paris dials predate the Swiss and Swiss made for like these watches from the late 70s through the 80s. People, I've found as a dealer, it's very hard to sell the Swiss dials on these models, whether we're talking about the Tank Louis Jumbo or other models. People only want it to say Paris on the dial. That's because there's only 2 words on the dial at the end, like Cartier and whatever is below 6 o'clock.
Dive in a little bit deeper into these hallmarks. So we have 2 different ones on this, and then quite a few on the buckle itself.
Yes.
Do we know what these mean and represent?
You'll see the 2 owls, which means it's a case that was imported into France.
Okay.
So these watches originally went into France. I always like the 2 owls, owl being a symbol of wisdom and knowledge, things like that. And then, so that whenever you see that, it's a case that was not made in France. If you see an eagle head or a series of eagle heads, that means the case was made in France. So you'll see that on some of the older Cartier watches. And then you see another hallmark in the center, which is usually just the case maker. That's more decoration than anything practical. But from a government perspective, the 2 owl hallmarks are important to know that it was an imported case.
Understood. And then the buckle itself, I think these are pretty similar, right? In terms of like, they're all like in terms of period correctness.
Yeah, yours has an eagle head hallmark, so it means it was made in France.
Gotcha. Yours has a...
That one might be a Swiss made, actually. Yeah. Let me see.
It's so crazy. The little nitty-gritty details on these things.
This was a Swiss-made buckle, funnily enough.
These are the fun things about Cartier is, you know, you can't... I've been trying to Google the meaning of these hallmarks for...
Even look at, by the way, the it's a different shape. This is a wider kind of D. They always call these like D buckles. Yeah. This is kind of longer. Yours is wider.
It's very interesting.
I think your buckle's cooler, honestly. I like the French made one slightly more, awesome. But they're both great.
Okay, so the search was back on, and I was armed with all the knowledge possible about these watches, and I knew exactly what I wanted and exactly what to look for. Sure, the price was still a factor, and I justified it by guessing the ones in the best condition would appreciate more than the others, but to be frank, I wanted to keep this watch for a very long time and just wanted the best possible example. I started scouring everything from Instagram and Chrono24 to random websites and dealers' inventories, hoping to come across another Cristallor that checked all my boxes. One day, during my daily routine of searching the reference number on Instagram, I came across a picture with the caption in Japanese. My first thought was it was just another collector showing off their watch, but when I clicked into the profile, it was a prestigious watch retailer out of Tokyo who actually just got this in stock. It wasn't the best picture, but it seemed to check all my boxes. The excitement was starting to build, and finding one in Japan was an added plus. The Japanese have a culture of appreciating well-made things and keeping their belongings in excellent condition. It's a massive destination for vintage watch collectors because of just that. I immediately checked their website and found more rather overexposed shots, but it still looked promising. I Google translated the entire page and inquired asking for more pictures and all the questions about the watch I didn't ask the first time around. A few days later, after I was certain everything checked out and the dealer was reputable, I typed in my credit card information and clicked purchase.
It's 12:20 a.m. and I just bought the watch.
Unfortunately, the Japanese don't really budge on price, so my shrewd negotiating skills were worthless this time around. After the tax back and conversions, it ended up being a touch under $23,000. $23,000 sent for a watch I hadn't even seen in person. The only problem was it was sitting 7,000 miles away. After making the world's best pitch to my wife on why I wanted to fly to Japan to pick up a watch, I booked tickets, packed our suitcases, and headed off to the land of sushi, cherry blossoms, matcha, and raw denim. Speaking of raw denim, give me a little bit of time to tell you about a brand that heard about my stupid idea of wanting to fly halfway around the world to pick up a watch and decided to sponsor the video to make it possible. Asket epitomizes the lesson of buy one, cry once, although the prices are actually pretty reasonable. Asket is a favorite of mine and has been featured organically many times on the channel now. It's pretty much all I wear. They focus on making high quality men's staples sustainably that make it so easy to pair items together. The raw denim fabric in particular is made from a brand called Karabo, who was one of the first denim producers in Japan almost 140 years ago. If you are familiar with raw denim, it's a fabric that has been dyed with indigo and hasn't been washed or distressed in any way. It's crafted like denim used to be before machines took over. Karabo takes the traditional craftsmanship and attention to detail and uses slower methods like rope dyeing and ring spinning yarns for durability. It's similar to a vintage watch where your jeans start to tell a story as you wear them and how they fade. have a tendency to keep your phone in your front left pocket, it'll fade accordingly. Your wallet in your back pocket, it'll fade accordingly. After a few years of wearing, you're left with denim that looks nothing like anything on the market and fades and naturally distresses in ways that machines can't replicate. The denim is cut and sewn in Italy and uses recycled metals for the buttons and 100% organic cotton for the lining. At 13 ounces, it's a great weight for year-round wear, and the dark indigo color pairs well with any outfit. They come in 3 different fits: the slim, the standard, and the loose, 9 different waist sizes, and 5 different lengths to allow you to get your perfect fit. I'm rocking the standard size in a 32-32, and I own other jeans from them as well and can say they only get better with age. I turn down majority of partnership offers with brands I don't use or fully stand behind, but Asket is one of those exceptions. As you start digging deeper into them, you only come to respect them more and more, and I truly couldn't recommend them enough. Thanks again to Asket for sponsoring this video. So we made our way over to Ishida Best, a watch shop that's been around in Tokyo since 1979, and met up with Tao and Kawakami, who helped facilitate the purchase and delivery. Finally, after a ton of mistakes, learnings, and patience, the hunt was over. I got my very own Cartier Cristallor in pristine condition. A quirky thing about these vintage Cartiers is that they come on fixed leather straps on a deployment clasp. While they look very clean and minimal, this means that there is zero adjustability, similar to a bracelet, so your straps have to be custom made for the watch itself. I decided to get a few orders so that they were ready by the time I brought the watch home. The first one is an entry-level calfskin taupe Togo leather strap made by the guys over at Handon. The next 2 are from a fully bespoke leather strap maker named Ellipse over at Atelier Yang. They are completely hand-cut, hand-stitched, and hand-painted, and is a true labor of love and passion. They feature French stitching, which is known for its durability and slanted look. The lining of the brown lizard one is made from a special type of calfskin known for its moisture resistance and durability, and is used only in watch straps. The Himalayan crocodile is a riskier pick since it is a bit bold, but I'm very pleased with how it turned out. I wanted the top to be all white and gradually fade into the gray towards the bottom, and he absolutely nailed it. With Ellipse at Atelier Yang, you can customize every detail of the strap, and he can make any vision come to life. Opted to go for the crocodile lining for this one with the smaller crocodile scales on the inside. The guys over at Ishida were kind enough to make me a strap as well, so I was able to rock it throughout our trip to Japan. Summers in Japan are hot, and we were averaging about 20,000 steps a day. I looked down at my wrist midday, and the text on the dial looked a bit fuzzy. Immediately, I took it off to get a closer look, and I noticed that there was condensation building on the inside of the crystal. My heart dropped, thinking I just ruined my watch. It was starting to make sense though that those spots on the old watch's dial were likely due to water damage from the lack of water resistance on these vintage Cartiers. Luckily, we weren't too far from Ishida, so I brought it in and they were able to handle it with their watchmaker to get it dried off before anything major happened.
These dials are very, very sensitive to cracking and crazing and spot. I mean, these are not water resistant cases at all. Probably half of the watches you see out there have dial condition issues.
What would you recommend in terms of care for these sorts of watches?
I think you got to avoid extreme humidity, as mentioned. Also, when you go between like a very hot outdoor and a very cold indoor, that's when you see a lot of fogging typically. So if you're outside in 100-degree heat and then you go into a 65-degree hotel, like you're gonna probably see it fog up. If it does fog up, I recommend pulling the crown out and putting it upside down and just let it dry out for 2 days at least. Then it is also good to bring it to a watchmaker to see if they can dry it off, particularly if you actually see a lot of water in the crystal, because water and moisture is the enemy of these movements.
That being said, it's important to store your watches properly as well. I've always just thrown mine on a nightstand or on a shelf, but as the collection keeps growing, I wanted a proper watch box. With these vintage watches, you really want to be careful about having them in a temperature-controlled environment away from any humidity and light. I found Rapport London, and I got my hands on their watch box. It's fully handcrafted with solid wood and multiple layers of lacquer to give it that sheen. The inside is fully lined and suede and features similar cushions to Rolex, allowing it to fit both mine and my wife's watches. You can feel the quality of this box as soon as you get it in hand, and the fit and finishing on it is incredibly well done. Alright, so after this entire saga, you would assume I'm turned off by vintage watches altogether. but it's actually quite the opposite. I realize how deep the world for vintage watches actually goes, and there's a lot of opportunities to find really cool stuff at reasonable prices because the resources are so scarce. And while I love my modern pieces, there's something about the character of vintage and the fact that you'll likely never run into someone with something similar on their wrist that I really love. Spend the extra money up front, know what you're buying, and trust the dealer you're buying from, and you'll be just fine. I know for me this is the first of many, so if anyone has a collector grade Rolex 1675 for sale, hit me up in a few months. As always, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.